Good evening and welcome to a special edition of our Sanctuary of Praises Hour of Power. I am so glad that you are with us on today. And if you are on Facebook Live, I ask that you share. Why don't you share? This is going to be an amazing discussion. I have been looking forward to this discussion for a couple of weeks now, just believing that this is the time for us to talk about mental health during the pandemic. I believe that every last one of us that will be listening to this dynamic, wonderful woman. She's a woman of God, but she's also a doctor of medicine. And I'm so glad that she's going to be our guest today, and we're going to ask her some pointed questions, and we are hoping that what her answers will enlighten you, will inform you, will even encourage you that if you are struggling with mental health issues, or you know someone else that is struggling, you can help them as they get better during this pandemic. Welcome, 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 Dr. Ann McDaniels. She is a forensic psychotherapist. I believe I said that right. Come on, Dr. Ann, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Good evening, good evening. I am Dr. Ann McDaniel, and I am a forensic psychotherapist in private practice. I've been in private practice for about 18 years. So I provide individual, marriage, family, relationship counseling, in addition to the forensic part. And I noticed Bishop wanted me to explain just what that means, this forensic psychotherapist. So psychotherapy is like an umbrella term that houses anybody who is trained to treat emotional behaviors. So that could be a therapist, that could be a social worker, that could be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, falls up under that umbrella. The forensic part is what I like to call investigation discovery. That's the part where you're trying to find out, just like you hear forensic detective, a forensic accountant. That's the person who's trying to find out the when, where, why, and how of something, more likely a crime that has happened. So that part of my job, what I do, if someone commits a crime and they go to court, the courts may order them to be evaluated to see if they're competent to stand trial, to see their mental status at the time of a crime, or you may have someone that just want to be evaluated. I've had clients that were seeking custody for their children, and so the courts want them to have a forensic eval to see if they're mentally competent to care for their children. You have people who are going through divorce and they want to have another spouse evaluated to prove some type of mental disorder, or you may have someone like an officer involved in a crime, and they may have to have what's called a fitness for duty exam. So that's what the forensic part is. You're doing an investigative discovery, and then you're going to write a report that you basically submit to the court that tells the court what this person's mental status is. So that's what I do.
That is wonderful. Gosh, that sounds exciting. That sounds really exciting. And when I saw the title, I said, oh, wow, a big title here. And I know that just when I put that up on the flyer, there were so many people that probably said, well, just what exactly does she do, that we can tap in on. So you have helped with a number of things, from child support to marital problems and all of the other things that encompass mental health and mental illness. The first question I want to ask is, when you say mental health, can you define it? For, sometimes people be saying, well, mental health is someone that's schizophrenic or whatever. Can you tell what all it encompasses?
So you are absolutely right. When you say mental health, people automatically go to the far end of the scale. And they identify people who are having severe mental illness experiences, and that's what make people shy away from or avoid mental health. But mental health is all the way down the other end to something as simple as, I can't seem to get my mind organized today. Mentally, I'm just not connecting with what I need to do. That's mental health. Anytime you talk about anything, when you're dealing with your mind and your ability to focus and your ability to think and process and analyze and function, it's mental health. So we have to put mental health on a larger scale than just what we see on TV or what we've been told or what we witness when we see someone who has a severe mental illness walking around in our neighborhood. We have to broaden that gamut and that perspective of mental illness and realize mental illness is something as simple as I can't get it together today.
Oh, wow. That is a very broad definition. Because if that's the case, a lot of us are dealing with some mental health issues because
Absolutely.
there are days that many of us cannot get it together today. And
Absolutely.
wow. So that's good. And that's good to know. In the last 6 months, have we seen a lot of mental health issues on the rise since the pandemic?
Absolutely. And not mental health on that far end of the scale that we talked about earlier, that I just talked about, the schizophrenic, the bipolar, not necessarily that end of the spectrum, but people who are dealing with maybe the middle to the other end with anxiety and depression, because a lot with the COVID, especially at the beginning of it, we were dealing with a lot of unknowns, and we're still dealing with a lot of unknowns. And so you have this pandemic that has presented us with this disease that's deadly or can be deadly, and people don't know, we don't have the answers to fixing it or stopping it or resolving it, or we don't see an end to it. It creates anxiety in people, creates depression in other people. The anxiety becomes, what do I do? How do I protect myself? How do I protect my family? And then on top of the having to deal with that pandemic, we have to deal with the news, who constantly feeds us all of the negative things that are happening with the pandemic. And so that creates more anxiety. It's like, oh my God, when is it going to happen to me? Is it going to happen to me? What if it happens to me? And we get stuck in that place. And so that creates the anxiety. Anxiety is always driven around what if. And it's always a bad what if. What if this happens? It's just like when you're you might have an opportunity to speak on a public platform. And before you speak, you start to get anxious. It's a lot of times it's because, what if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? It's always driven by what if, and that what if is never something positive. So yes, in the last 6 months, we've seen an increase of that. On the other end of the spectrum, we've seen people who are dealing with the depression part. So you have people who have had family members that unfortunately have died from the pandemic, or maybe in the hospital and they can't get to that family member. And so now they're in a depressed state because they feel helpless. When people feel helpless, they feel hopeless. So it makes them feel depressed. And so that has been on the rise. Another thing that has happened with mental health during the pandemic is the social distancing. And so when we started to social distance, people define that as social disconnect. So if I have to distance myself, that means I have to disconnect from people. And some people are very sociable. They need social interaction. They need to know that, me and my girlfriends are going out on Friday and we're going to have dinner, or, me and my husband are going out this weekend. They need that social interaction. Now, there are some people like myself who are introverts, like, okay, social distancing, I do that anyway. But there are other people who actually need that interaction. And because that interaction has been minimized and initially taken away, that creates depression for them. What do I do? Who do I talk to? But I think one of the things that will help us, and I hope I'm not going over the answer to your question.
Go ahead.
One of the things I think that will help us, and talking about the pandemic and seeing an increase in it, is that because we don't have all of the answers, I think it's going to be important and helpful if we begin to identify with the fact that it's okay to establish a new normal. As long as you keep trying to grab for what used to be and you don't see a resolve to it, you're going to keep yourself in a cycle to be subjected to anxiety or depression or whatever. But when you realize, okay, I would love to have the normal I've had before because life was going good for me, but because that doesn't exist, let me create a new normal. Let me create a normal that can work for me in the midst of what's happening. If we can get to that point mentally and understanding it's okay for me to recreate and redevelop something, I think that will help minimize, not totally alleviate, but minimize some of the anxiety and depression and discomfort that we feel as a result of the pandemic.
Oh God, that is so true. It's just so true. Because sometimes you sit down and you wonder, am I really anxious? Because sometimes when you hear about people that are very close to you and they love them, and then you found out that they have COVID, and that anxiety, kind of, you get anxious and you say, oh Lord, am I gonna get it? Or, I heard you saying that, and that kind of identifies many of us, because we know that we love them, we've been around them, and this kind of thing. We begin to think of ourselves and think, oh, is this going to really happen to me? I was looking at the news on today, and Michelle Obama, the first lady, our first lady, admitted that she had been dealing with some mental health issues, and she did it today on her podcast, and of course it came out on the evening news. And she was saying that one of the problems she was having is because of the pandemic. She felt she called it low depression. I don't know exactly what that meant, but because I think depression is depression, but she described it as low depression, LOW. Can you give some feedback on that?
Yes. And so just as we put mental health on a scale, we have to put depression on a scale. So you have people who you can have lose a loved one and experience depression. That's normal. That happens when we have loss. Or you can have someone who has what we call major depression. These are people who have been actually diagnosed and met criteria. And criteria, when I say met criteria, we use something called the DSM. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And what that does is it tells us the criteria that people have to meet in order to be diagnosed with a mental illness. And so you have people that have met criteria and they are diagnosed with major depression. That's a whole nother scale. This is a person who their depression causes them to lose the ability to function on a daily basis. They can't get out of bed. They can't care for their families. They can't go to work. But then you have, and they may need medication to help with that. But then you have depression on the other end. It's just depression because of life experiences. And we have all had life experiences that have made us sad. And so instead of saying, I feel sad, some people may say, I feel depressed. The terms use interchangeably.
Okay. So maybe she just feel a little sad because it won't end. And I think that's the mindset of a lot of us, is that we feel sad because we want this to come to an end. Right. It really, and the more we think about it in that vein, we feel that we call it, I'm tired of this, I'm sick of this, when in actuality, maybe it's some type of low depression that we're getting.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So let me ask this question then. In the African American community, are the numbers high or are the numbers low? Do you see some people, we always being the African American community has more people that are suffering from corona. The African American have more people with high blood pressure. We're always at the top of the scale. What about with mental health?
African Americans are at the top of the scale with mental health, but I think that's for a number of reasons. We don't get or seek treatment.
Okay.
Other races do. And so, whereas you may have, let me give you an example. If we have 10 Caucasians in a room and we have 10 African Americans in the room, and 6 of each set is diagnosed with a mental disorder or has some type of mental disorder, but only 2 of the African Americans can get treatment, and all of the Caucasians can get treatment, and we send both groups out, what does it look like? It looks like African Americans have a higher case of mental disorders, but the reality is that less of them were treated.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yes, yes, it makes sense. Okay, so, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so I guess my question is then, less of us that are being treated, why do you feel that African Americans, because I have heard this and I've said it in times past, I don't say it anymore, but we feel that, oh, we are not supposed to go to therapists. We're not supposed to seek professional counseling and things of that nature. And we shy away from it. Why do you think if the pastor did not counsel me, then, and I feel like if my pastor counsels me and he tell me all is well, then all is well. And I'm going in on the other flip side, I'm still dealing with what I'm dealing with. And they'll tell me, okay, well, we're going to pray, and we pray, and I'm still dealing in my mind of what I'm dealing with. So why is it not necessary, or why do I feel that I don't need to seek professional counseling?
Oh, wow. That's probably an hour discussion by itself. But I don't think there's one reason. I think there are a number of reasons why African Americans don't seek mental health treatment. One is the stigma associated with it. And so because there is a stigma, or for another word for a stigma is a lie perpetuated, meaning retold over and over again, becomes a person's truth. If that truth is never challenged, it remains their truth. And so they are going to operate around what they believe that truth is, thus related to the stigma that mental health is this thing you do not talk about. For years, you hear someone in a Black family might say, oh, that's just crazy Uncle Joe. And as long as we're getting a check for Uncle Joe, then we just let him do his thing, and we have what I call Grandma's Bible. And in Grandma's Bible is what happens in this house stays in this house. We don't let people know our business. And so you have all of these scriptures from Grandma's Bible that we live by. So we don't go get help because we don't tell people what's going on in our house. We don't make our family look bad. So we can't tell if something is going wrong. We just have to suffer it out. Like you say, go talk to pastor. Pastor will give you an answer, and whatever pastor says, then that's what we live by. I think another reason we don't seek help is the lack of knowledge. Sometimes people just don't know where to go, and they don't know who to ask because the people they know don't know where to go or how to seek treatment. I think the misconceptions with seeking treatment. Sometimes people feel, I think when you say mental health, people think everybody who's dealing with a mental issue is on medication. And that's the first thing they say when they come to counseling. I don't want medication. Okay, well, we're not talking about medication. I don't even prescribe medication. So let's talk about, but we do need to talk about coping skills and tools to help you get through with what you're dealing with. So that concept that, everybody takes medication and limited resources. There are a lot of African Americans that just don't have access to resources to get the help that they need. So I think it wasn't just one thing, it's a number of things. And, historically, African Americans kind of fear the medical profession anyway, rightfully so, because of all the things that have happened. If you've heard of the Tuskegee experiment and various other things that have contributed to that fear of we don't trust. And for the most part, now we're starting to see more African Americans work in mental health. But prior to, I would say 20 years ago, you didn't see very many African Americans in mental health. So there was a lack of trust there. I'm not going to trust you to tell me what's wrong with me. Diagnose me and give me a check and we're fine. We keep it moving.
We're really down with that check, aren't we? We want the check. Yes, but I'm concerned because a lot of times, and this is just your personal opinion, but do you feel that sometimes we as pastors, because I'm a pastor, and sometimes we as pastors need to get some type of mental health training, mental health school, or what do we need to do to make sure that when we counsel with our membership, that we are telling them the best thing for them? Or do we need to say, okay, I need to refer you to a professional counselor?
Okay, so let me preface this by saying, because I don't want anybody to hear what I say and then not get the help they need. If your pastor is the only source you have to begin your process to getting some mental health treatment, then begin your process with your pastor. With that being said, I do believe that it is very, very important or helpful if pastors would have some type of mental health training. However, a couple of classes or a couple of workshops, I don't believe is significant. And I don't believe the term or the title pastor in and of itself constitutes the ability to provide counseling on every level. And here's why I believe that. When you start talking about counseling people, you are opening doors to layers sometimes of different things, damage, molestation, a whole lot of things. And sometimes when you're counseling people, you don't know what's under those layers. And if you open those layers and you don't properly deal with them, heal them, and close them, you create further problems and you cause people to have even more mental health issues. So what I think would be a good thing for most churches is to have resources available and be willing to say, I think a pastor should be willing to say when it's beyond their scope, and not feel the pressure because they are the pastor that they have to solve this problem, but rather understand, okay, this person has more issues than I can deal with. Let me get them some professional help. Because even sometimes with professional help, it takes a while to work through some things once things start to be exposed. And so that takes me back to people with experiencing anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that anxiety and depression is also triggered from things that have been suppressed for years, and it starts to come out. I always tell people, when we push things down, we become like a pressure cooker. And if we never release the steam off of it and something comes along and takes the part off of that pressure cooker, everything explodes. And when it explodes, they don't know how to process it. They don't know how to deal with it. And it starts to come out in their behaviors. And so now they don't know what to do. And they go wherever they can to get some help. But if the person who is helping them doesn't understand that those behaviors are connected to something deeper, you cause more problems than help.
Wow, this is good. This is really good, Doc. And you know what? It's so much needed because you're bringing up so many things that I know as myself as a pastor, and I'm pretty sure other pastors have dealt with through the years. And now you're looking at it in a different way. At least I am, because I realize that to me, everything that comes to the pastor is not necessarily for the pastor to have to worry about trying to work it out. Right. You need to send it to someone that has the expertise and knows how to get it done. And that doesn't necessarily mean send them to the deacon or to the other pastor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna get back to that because I have a few more questions, but I want to ask this. And I asked, why that we don't seek professional help, but let's address the elephant in the room. And I have been toying with, putting this out there, having this discussion on it, but we're going to address it anyway because a lot of people want to know. And my question, I'm going to address it this way so it can come out real nice and decent, is bipolar disorder, is that inherited, or is there some type of gene in an individual that causes it to come up in later years? Because most times when people are diagnosed as bipolar, it's later in life, seem like to me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes people are not diagnosed until later in life. It's because that's when they really seek help for it and really get the intervention that they need.
Okay.
Prior to that, sometimes it's just blown off as, um, and bipolar is one of the most misused terms. Anytime we see somebody with a mood swing, we say, oh, she's just bipolar, he's just bipolar. So it's one of those terms that we just throw around like it's a piece of candy. But bipolar, there is no really known cause of bipolar, but it's believed to be connected to a combination of genetics, environment, other type of mental trauma that causes the bipolar. So there's no known one factor, but it's believed to be connected to a combination of things.
Okay. Okay.
So, but bipolar itself it's not just a mood swing, because we all go through mood swings. The whole world will be bipolar. There's some days, one minute I'm feeling good, something else can happen, and I'm like, you know what? This has just been a bad day, when it hasn't, but that's just life. Bipolar is people who have what's called mania and hypomania. And you have two types of bipolar. Well, you have four really, but two major types is bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. And so, but you have to, when I talked about the DSM before, you have to meet criteria. And these are people, when you're talking about mania, you're talking about these people who have very impulsive type behavior. They will go out and spend $5,000 on nothing.
Wow.
Don't even need it. Hypomania is a lower level of the mania. So you still have that euphoric feeling, but it's not as bad as the mania. These are people who, a bipolar experience might be a person who can stay up all night cleaning their house and don't sleep. So bipolar, I think, is a misunderstood, misused term. And if you think you or someone is experiencing bipolar, or bipolar can go to major depressive episode. These are people who, and that now you're talking about the bipolar 2. These are people who become so depressed, they can't come out of it just by themselves. They need help with either medication or medication and therapy. Okay.
Well, if a person is bipolar, how would a family member be able to detect without perhaps going to a doctor? If I have a bipolar person, or I'm suspicious of somebody in the family being bipolar, what would I look for?
Look for what we would call abnormal behavior. And there's no one right definition to abnormal, but if their behavior is interfering with the normal functions of life. So here's a person who is making decisions that you know he or she shouldn't be doing that right now, and it's kind of off. Those are the kind of behaviors you're looking for. So like if you see that person who never sleeps, if you see that person who has the impulsive behavior of doing something, they don't think, they just do it, and it happens often. Those are the kinds of things you might look for. If you see that person who normally this person would function, but they're not getting out of the bed, they stop interacting with people, that's the depressive side. Go have them evaluated. The thing about bipolar is you can't detect it just by looking at it. Okay. Just because you see something that looks like bipolar doesn't necessarily mean that it is. But if you see something that's suspect, or you feel it looks like it, have them evaluated and let a professional determine if it's truly bipolar.
So during the pandemic, what about people becoming bipolar during this time, during the pandemic? And part of it to me would be more social distancing than anything, because after being kind of sheltered in place, and these type of things seem like that would play with the mind a little bit, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it causes people to have a break from reality, which becomes psychosis. So it can trigger these mental disorders. Yes, it absolutely can happen.
Yeah. Well, we're praying for the people that really do have to deal with that, because I think that during this pandemic, the pandemic from my evaluation of it, has brought out a lot of mental health issues in a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about people of color or white or whatever, but I'm talking about even in Christendom. You've seen people go through so much depression in the last 6 months, and you don't know really what else to say to them. You don't know, what to say. And I'm at that point, and I'm sure a lot of other pastors are at that point. We're saying, come on, let's pray, believe God, get in your word. These are things that we say, but what do you all say?
And you are so right. In Christian, and I am a Christian, I love the Lord, speak in tongues, pray fast, all of that. But we are taught to hide behind the word and hide behind prayer. But even the Bible says faith without works is dead. Believe, pray, and do something. Believe, pray. I have a shirt that says prayer and therapy work together. So pray, but go talk to someone. And I like to describe dealing with a mental issue like this. So if you're in a pot of boiling water, what is your goal? To get out, right? So more than likely, you are scrambling and fighting and trying to get out. Well, if I am on the outside of that pot, I see that pot from a different perspective than you do. So now I can say, Bishop Gilbert, if you go over that way, the pot is a little cooler. You might be able to get out. But you can't see that part because you're fighting trying to get out. And that's what therapy is. Therapy is that person that's on the outside of that pot that's able to see it from a different perspective, that's able to help you see a different way of getting through an issue or processing an issue or how you interpret an issue. And so when we look at it like that, we take some of the stigma off of it. We take some of the unknowns out of it because you don't have to know everything going to therapy. And another thing with therapy and being Christians is we make people feel like if they go to therapy, they don't have faith in God. But we go to the doctor and we will get medication for high blood pressure. We will get medication for diabetes. We will get medication for cholesterol. We will take care of our physical health, but somehow if I seek help for my mental process, I'm not trusting God. You're not believing God. Or here's a big one. That's just a demon.
Yeah. I was about to get there.
Yeah. You don't get mental health treatment because I don't want to be known that I have a demon. Who wants to be known that they have a demon? So those are the things that keep people in the church from getting the help they need. And sometimes it's just as simple as going for a few sessions, dealing with the problem and moving on with life.
I was glad you said that because I was about to make that statement. I come out of old school church, and where I come from, you just didn't run to any doctor,
right?
Almost until you got a release from the pastor, that the pastor will say, okay, go to the doctor. But other than that, we stood on our faith and we just believe God or whatever. And one of the things that when we saw people that seemed like they were depressed and they were going through those things, you are so right. The first thing we said is that demon needs to be cast out of her, or that demon needs to be cast out of him. But now high blood pressure is not a demon, and diabetes is not a demon, but your mental health, that's a demon. I don't get it either. I don't get that.
Well, the truth is, back in I can't remember the decade, but early on with mental health was believed to be caused by demonic spirits. And what they would do something called trephining. And that's where they would drill a hole in the head of people with a mental disorder and let them bleed out. And that was a way they thought of bleeding out the demons. So back in the day, in the early centuries of mental health and the discovery and of mental health, they did think it was demonically influenced, and that if they drain the brain, it would drain the demon out. So it comes down through history of mental illness.
Wow, was that an African American
No,
process?
no,
Oh,
ma'am.
yeah, because I can't see nobody draining the brain. Oh my gosh, that is something. But yeah, we look at it though in that sense, and we've always looked at it. So we were always very fearful coming up in Christendom that you would tell anybody I'm depressed. You would
Mhm.
say, "Oh no, I'm not depressed. The joy of the Lord is my strength." You know,
Mhm,
we
mhm,
quote the scriptures and everything like that. Because,
mhm.
but we go home and we're depressed. We're in the bed
Right.
all day. We're sleeping. We're doing all of the things that you were just have been describing, and we really did not want people to know that
Mhm,
just where I'm coming to now, where I'm getting ready to come to. The same thing happens to women who have been in domestic violence type of situations, and I think that that has a lot of mental health issues going on there too. I'm wondering if a woman who has been physically beaten, especially, I don't know, because I'm not a doctor physically or a therapist, but when your head is being pounced and your body is being pounced in, how much of that does something to you mentally? I don't know, but it just seems like depression, all kinds of things would set in, and it's going to take some therapy to get that out.
Absolutely, because people who are in abusive relationships, the goal of the abuser is power and control. So if I'm going to control you, I have to change your mental process. I have to change the way you think. I have to change the way you process. I have to change the way you see me. And so all of that, and so the things that they tell the person that they're abusing, all of those things begin to play in their mental processes. And it does help to perpetuate and cause and amplify mental health in women who are abused. Absolutely.
Wow. That's, and we find that mental health has nothing to do with schizophrenia only, because that's all, for a long time, that's all I believed it was. It was like, because if you had a family member and they would wander off in the streets, and everybody would know that's your uncle or whatever, they knew not to bother him or whatever. But that's what I saw as mental illness. I didn't really equate mental illness with all of the things that we are talking about tonight.
Right.
And you would be surprised of how many people in this world has dealt with mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell my class when I'm teaching sometimes is that they need to change the face of mental illness in their mind. We don't know. Sometimes the professional people that you deal with, the doctors, the nurses, the attorneys, the judges, these are people who are also diagnosed with mental illness. The difference is they have learned about their mental illness, and they are either getting therapy or on some type of medication. So mental illness you can be walking down the street next to someone, look perfectly normal, and can be a person who has schizophrenia.
Wow.
So we have to change the face of how we see mental illness. When we change the face of how we see it, then we'll change our response to it.
Wow. Oh, that is, and some people that are schizophrenic. I'm thinking about Donny Hathaway. I don't know whether you're familiar with his music. He passed away years ago. Donny Hathaway was a great musician and singer, and I used to love his music. But then he was dealing with what, schizophrenia or whatever, and
Yes, and I
until
think
he started hearing voices in his head, right?
Yes, I'm vaguely familiar with his story. I know his one song, but yes, and he eventually committed suicide. And so
Exactly.
sometimes I think, people, let's talk about suicide and mental illness.
Okay.
I think most people think a mental illness causes you to commit suicide. It contributes to it, doesn't necessarily causes it. Let's take a depressed person, for instance. A person with depression, let's just say you knew someone with depression and they committed suicide. Well, for the most part, when that person is in their deepest state of depression, they don't have the energy to commit suicide. It's not until they start coming out of it. That's the most dangerous point, because now they have energy to do something. And what can happen is once they start to feel better, they don't want to go back to that place.
Oh, wow.
So if I don't want to go back to that place, what am I going to do? I'm going to stop it while I'm in a good place.
Mm.
And so we say mental illness causes, doesn't necessarily cause it. It's a contributing factor. And so when people who are dealing with mental illness can't get the help they need, they find there's a place of hopelessness. When I'm in hopelessness and I don't see any resolve, that's when I'm trying to end it, because I don't want to have to experience that anymore. There's no other way than to do it this way.
Oh, wow. That's so sad. That's so sad. I want to pause right here. We're going to go back with a few questions, but Dr. Ann, I want people to know how to get in touch with you. I'm sure there are some people on this line, on this live, and they may say, well, you know what, I'm not going to put my question here. But I want to get in touch with her for some clarity on some things. Can you give us an information how to get in touch with you?
Yes, I can be reached several ways. I'm on my social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Dr. Ann Cares. On Facebook, you can find me at McDaniels Consulting and Counseling, or you can email me at info@mcdanielscounseling.org. That's info@mcdanielscounseling.org. Or if you'd like to schedule a session, you can call my office at 912-306-7714. That's my personal cell. My business phone is 912-349-0030. 912-349-0030. And my website is www.mcdanielscounseling.org.
Okay. You said something that I'm going to have to go into. You said to schedule a session. Now, let them know what a session entails.
A session entails
what, an hour?
45 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes.
Okay.
And we take almost all major insurances. And for those of you who are employed, your job has something that's called an EAP. That's an employee assistance program. And a lot of people don't know about it. But before you even tap into your insurance, you can call your human resources and get free sessions where you won't even have to pay your copay. And so you can get, I think they do 3 to 5 free sessions that are yours that you can use. So I always encourage people, use that EAP, get those free sessions. Then from there, we see if you need to go beyond using your insurance and just paying your copay. So you call in your first session, you come in, we're going to do an assessment of what's going on with you to determine what type of treatment plan you might need and how we need to move forward. Now, that first session, we may not get to completing the treatment plan. It just depends on how detailed and how much we have to go into. But for the most part, that first session, we're going to come up with a treatment plan. We're going to talk about what you need to do with coping skills. And I'm a homework giver. So if you come to me for therapy, I'm going to give you homework. And my thing to my clients is, you talk to me for 45 to 50 minutes, but you live outside of my office. So you need to work outside of my office. You need to implement some things. You need to change some things. You need to do some things. And so there is work in therapy. It is, for me, it is not just talking to me for 45 minutes. It's let's talk and let's come up with a plan. We're going to come up with a plan together that you are going to work outside of the office and come back. We're going to assess that plan. We're going to talk about how that plan is working or not working, and if we need to develop new plans. And that's what therapy is about from my office.
All right. Sounds exciting. Sounds exciting. We're hoping that we're going to come back at the end and allow you to give out that information again for those that probably didn't get a chance to jot it down, especially at least the phone number for calling in for a session or whatever. And then, of course, the email where they can email you personally. All right. My last question, we're coming to a close, but one of my last questions is that where post-pandemic, let's look at post-pandemic, if we ever get there, and I believe, God, that we will. But what do you see for us post-pandemic mentally? Where do you see, do you feel that there's going to have to be a lot of counseling and things of that nature to get us back to a place, or we're going to be okay?
I think there's going to have to be counseling for a lot of people, but I think more importantly, there's going to have to be a decision made by people to accept that things are different. Once I decide, and that's a decision, once I decide that things are not like they used to be and not like what I'm used to, I begin to create what I talked about earlier, that new normal. And I put myself on a clean slate. And so when I put myself on a clean slate, I no longer have those expectations. If I don't have those expectations, then I'm not trying to reach them, so I don't become anxiety-ridden and frustrated because I can't reach the expectations that I have. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So post-pandemic, we're going to have to make some choices and some decisions that I'm going to accept this new normal, and I'm going to begin to build on what's new and what's coming forward.
Do you think some people are not going to make it?
I don't want to think that, but unfortunately, that's possible. I want to be optimistic and believe that people are either going to get help or make the changes they need to make to be okay. That's what I want.
I'm praying we will. I'm praying that everybody will accept the new normal, because it is going to be new. It's going to be new. And I think if we start thinking about along those lines now, when we get to post-pandemic, it will not be so difficult to make that change or to make that turn, because there's going to be a drastic turn in our lives. It's already turning. Turning.
Absolutely.
So I'm praying that many of us will accept what God has allowed.
Yes. Yeah. And if he has allowed it, he has a plan on the other side of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that. I really believe that. Now, let me ask you, do you have any questions, anything on your heart that you really wanted to talk about tonight, or you wanted to say to the audience, so that we can make sure we covered every part of this?
I think I have 4 things that I want to say to people. Number 1 is make it safe for people to not be okay. Everybody doesn't have to be okay all the time. We need to provide safe places where people can not be okay, where they can come and say, I'm not okay. I need help. I'm feeling depressed, or I'm experiencing anxiety, and not worry about you condemning them or putting them down or calling them crazy because of what they're experiencing, but you are helping them get the help they need to resolve whatever they are going through. So make it safe, provide safe spaces for people to not be okay. 2, avoid lumping every mental disorder into one category. Let's stretch that line out and make it okay that, okay, because I'm having a bad day or because I'm feeling, some anxiety, depression, doesn't necessarily mean I have this major mental disorder that you call me crazy and I need medication. It's okay. So see mental health on a broader scale. Let's remove the stigma and the stereotype of mental health. Let's let people know it's okay to talk to someone. It's okay to go to a professional. Going to a professional does not minimize you. It makes you human. Humans have issues. Humans have things to deal with. And the professionals are just there to help you come up with a plan to deal with those things, help you get through it, help you see it from a different perspective. And 4, leaders in the community. When leaders start advocating, like First Lady Obama did, when leaders start being transparent, when leaders start saying it's okay, and let's get mental health checkups, I believe the community will follow. I believe it will, when it starts with the leadership, it will bleed down to everybody else. So my call is to leaders, use your platforms, use whatever you have to make it safe, to make it okay for people to seek the mental health treatment that they need. And lastly, I know I said 4, but 5. And lastly, my plea, if you feel like you are in need of talking to someone, even if it's not myself, reach out. Reach out, talk to someone. It is not a lifelong commitment that you never get over. Sometimes it's just 3 sessions and things are better and you go on with life. Take care of your mental health just like you take care of any other part of your body.
Oh, wow. This has been amazing. This has really been amazing. I think we touched on a lot of things. And I know that the audience are really probably sitting there in awe for how transparent you were with giving out the information and, just letting us see your heart in this, the passion that you have for mental illness. And I just want you to know that you're a blessing. You're a blessing to the body of Christ. And what I think that people need to understand, you're not just coming from the professional arena only. You are a woman of God, a woman of faith, a woman of boldness, and they need to know that you're not just a Christian. You're a saved woman. That's what you call it.
Thank you.
So we're excited about that, to know that, first of all, we've got a strong African-American woman in that area in forensic psychotherapy. We got somebody there that can help us. And then that also, too, that she loves the Lord and she's able to do some of the things that we need to do and even put us in check in the word. So we need that. We need you. That's Savannah right. Needs you, and they need to know about you. Tell them again how they can get in touch with you, Dr. Amy.
Will do. First of all, I want to say thank you, Bishop Gilbert Grant, for providing this platform to talk about something that I am so passionate about. And I do want to see people get better. That's one of the joys of my life, when people walk out of my office and say, my life has changed, I'm different. So I appreciate you providing this platform. It's a topic that needs to be talked about, I think, on a monthly basis. We need to keep it in the forefront so that people don't forget and it doesn't fall by the wayside. And they don't forget all the things that the mental health professionals talk about and dealing with it and encouraging mental health treatment. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate you. So if they want to contact me, my office number is 912-349-0030. That's 912-349-0030. If you want to just jot me a message through email, it's info@mcdanielscounseling.com. That's info@mcdanielscounseling.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Dr. Ann Cares or McDaniels Counseling Consulting.
Wonderful. God bless you. And I pray that you have many clients and many that will come because of this particular Zoom tonight, that there are some people who will realize I need to reach out and touch and I need to talk to her, because there's no harm in talking with someone that can help you. The next time we're going to talk about grief. We didn't get into grief tonight, but we're going to talk about grief because there's a lot that's there. I know that's mental. That's mental. But we're going to end it. Thank you, Sanctuary Praise. Thank you, all of our others listeners. We love you with the love of the Lord. Don't forget, on Sunday, we will be right back at 10 o'clock here with our regular Sunday morning service. And we thank you for supporting us during this pandemic time. You have been amazing, and we bless you indeed. Until next time, we ask you to keep Sanctuary Praise in your heart and in your mind. We love you. And we pray nothing but God's blessings upon you. Have a good night.